Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Startup Sales. I'm really excited for today's episode. We have Steve Benson. He's the CEO of Badger Maps, which helps field sales agents, in their mapping and getting the most effective route that they can. So he works a lot with a lot of different salespeople, different types of salespeople. So we're going to talk today about leadership and how to be a better leader in these more difficult times. So really excited. Steve has a lot to offer and a lot of knowledge. So let's get to today's episode.
Startup Sales is a podcast about what it's really like to get a business off the ground. We talk with founders, CEOs, and sales VPs from the high-tech market. You'll learn how to build and scale a sales team. You'll also hear about the growth challenges and tough decisions from others who have had both successes and failures. And now, your host of the Startup Sales Podcast, Adam Springer.
Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Adam, thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to this. So let's just kind of jump into it and understand a little bit about who you are, what your background is.
Sure. So I guess I've been in sales and specifically field sales throughout my entire career in technology. So I was at IBM when I started out, and I was at a software company called Autonomy that got bought by HP. And then I went to Google for about 4 years. And then I started Badger Maps about, what was that? I guess about 8 years ago now, 8.5 years. So I guess I founded it to help field salespeople with their routes and their maps. And I've been, I guess, from the perspective of this topic, I've been in sales and specifically software sales and my whole career.
What do you think is the main difference between working at Google, working at HP, and being an early stage startup?
Well, IBM was a really, really big company when I was there. So that was actually more different than working at Google or Autonomy, which is like it was a public company, but a smaller one. And then Google, when I joined, and I was actually in their software division. So even though Google's a huge company now, when I was there, I guess I joined in like 2008. And so it was a relatively small company then too, particularly the enterprise software team. So it was more like being a part of a 250 person company that had limitless resources, or effectively limitless compared. So it's very different than what I experienced at Badger Maps, starting the company. I mean, I was employee number 0, I guess I'd say. And there's definitely, selling something that doesn't exist yet, and getting those early customers engaged and purchasing is a real challenge. It's a lot. Let's just say it's a lot easier to sell stuff when you're at Google or IBM and have those brands behind you.
Yeah, definitely. How big is your company now?
We have 70 employees, 50 kind of, full-time healthcare and everything. And then, I guess a lot of your listeners are overseas. So in America, we have to buy their healthcare. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
but so 50 like healthcare and everything, but then 20 more like part-time and interns and freelancers, that sort of thing, maybe 20, 30 of those.
That's interesting. So you have a big portion of your team is kind of outsourced, I guess you could call it. Freelancer, not full-time employee.
Yeah, and that's pretty common in America.
Yeah. All right. And so let's talk about like how are you managing your team before and versus now? Like what's the difference now with Corona and a bit of a crisis going on in the world, if nobody's noticed?
Yeah, I think we've all noticed at this point, right? I think the team is now working remotely. We were all in offices, so we were well set up to work remotely because we already had 4 offices. So people were accustomed to working with people that weren't in the same place with them, and kind of these cross-functional teams and cross-geography teams. So it was less of a leap for us than for a lot of people who Maybe we're all in one office and now they're learning to collaborate across time zones and across being in different places for the first time. So we haven't noticed we haven't noticed a huge decline in productivity. It's been things have been just fine for us really in that respect. But we have lost customers. About 25% of our customers have quit because we service field salespeople. That's who we help. That's who the software is for. And obviously, a lot of field sales or outside sales means you meet with people face to face, and your customers and your prospects. So a lot of those people are currently not able to meet with their customers or prospects. If you sell beer to bars, for example, obviously you're not an essential employee, and so bars are all closed still in America. I know it's not the case everywhere necessarily, but it's still closed here. So you can't sell beer to bars because bars aren't open. But other of our customers, if they sell, say, medical devices, they're still able to go into the office, or they're still able to meet with their customers face to face, and they're just selling at a distance of 10 feet, I guess, which is different than over the phone.
So if people are, the 25% that are leaving, some of them are non-essential, like you said, like selling beer to bars. But what about the ones that are still essential and you still need to sell? Do you see a bigger transition into going digital and using Zoom?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a transition into that. I think people are making do, and it's really challenging if you're used to selling with field sales. There is a big difference to having no face-to-face visits, right? Like being face-to-face, there are certain products that you just kind of have to sell face-to-face. It doesn't make sense to sell them over the phone or over Zoom. It doesn't make sense to sell them retail. You wouldn't sell them over the web. You kind of have to demo them in person, or the relationship's important, or it just takes too long to get done. It's too complex a sale. There's a lot of challenges to actually getting things done in a distanced way for a bunch of industries. And so it's just a tough time for those industries. I think in general, they've made the switch to selling over Zoom or over the phone, but it's definitely been a big challenge because we're seeing a lot of sales cycles expand. So something that would take 3 months to sell now takes 8 months to sell, we hope, and so I think that's kind of across the board with our customers. That's who have done that. That's kind of the feedback I'm getting. And, I think they're just, trying to gut it out and get through things and make revenue where they can until things pick back up here and we're able to safely get back together in the future.
Okay. It's interesting that you said like deal cycles are taking longer, you're finding.
Well, I guess not at our company, but because we actually don't sell with a field sales team. We sell, a fairly inexpensive piece of software. So that's like everybody else. We sell that with an inside sales team predominantly. Okay. But for a lot of products, the only way to sell, like if you're selling, a medical device to doctors, you're going to be doing that face to face, and that's for the most part is still happening face to face. But less essential industries are just kind of shut down right now.
Okay, so I wanted to touch base real quick on the 25% churn that you've had, and I wanted to know, was there a potentially more that you guys were able to stop by working with your clients? How did that process go?
Yeah, we definitely we were working with customers and trying to get them through the tough times. In general, like offering them 2 months free or something, to get them through a hard time, or letting them, we let them all pause it instead of actually canceling if they wanted to. Say, free of charge. If you just want to stop using this stuff, you can we'll press the pause button on it. But in general, people were either shut down or they were fine. They were able to go out and meet with customers and considered essential pretty quickly. And so most companies kind of went one way or the other relatively early on. Okay.
And so how are you dealing with the messaging aspect during this time with your prospects?
Well, I think certain elements of messaging need to change in these times. I think they're in a down economy, you want to change your messaging, and this is messaging right at the top of the web page to messaging that your sales reps are using out, with customers over the phone or in the field or whatever. You need to change your messaging from something like "will help you do better," which is really what you see in a lot of companies messaging, and this was fine messaging in good economic times, but in a bad economic time, I think you might do a little better, and if you changed your messaging to "we will help you do more with less." So, and then once you say that, then you go on to explain how much more you'll help them do, and that could be in terms of dollars, could be in terms of um, so we'll help you spend less money, we'll help you use less manpower, help you use less resources, but we'll help you do more with less. So kind of an efficiency message. We went through this at Badger as well. What we did was we changed the bulk of our messaging and what our reps were saying from our messaging has always been, we'll help you sell 20% more with your field sales team. And now the message is, with Badger Maps, your outside sales team can generate the same revenue, even though your team is 20% smaller. And, there's a huge difference between these two things. Even though you're basically saying the same thing, one of these messages is going to resonate way more with your customers in a down economy. So you may want to look at the top of your website and see if you can change from that kind of good economy messaging to bad economy messaging.
I like it. It's basically looking at what the prospect is thinking about most. During a good economy, that's always like, okay, let's make more sales. Let's make more sales. During the down economy, it's how do we save money? How do we close the gap?
Absolutely.
And I like how you said it, like, okay, we could help you make 20% more sales, or now it's, hey, we could help you maintain the same and cut your cost by 20%.
Exactly.
So it's terrific. Okay. And so when you're putting that on the messaging what's the difference between messaging for the website versus messaging for sales when you're talking about this?
Well, from that perspective, I think on front and center on the website, and front and center on how the messaging is when your reps are, giving a presentation, et cetera, it's going to be very similar. But I guess the reps are going to more explain and be able to tailor how you're going to help them do more with less. How are they going to save resources? Where are they going to save resources? How are they going to help you spend less? How is each person that you have doing the thing that you have them doing going to do more? I think the rep can really tailor the knowledge and tailor the messaging, whereas on the website it's more genericized, it's lighter, it's smaller, it's quicker to ingest. You want it to be ingestible very quickly. I think in both cases as well, you want to make ROI analysis and other financial analysis very readily available. You want your reps bringing it up. You want the information available to the customer right on the website, like giving them the tools, giving them a spreadsheet to download and kind of put in their assumptions and be able to cleanly calculate where they're exactly going to save money in terms of dollars, in terms of resources, and where exactly they're going to get more out of that in terms of dollars and in terms of resources. So really helping them calculate that, because so many from the top down, budgets have been often are being under a lot of scrutiny. The purse strings are closed, and so almost any major purchase or any sizable purchase is going to have to be floated up the financial chain by your sponsor. So if you sell to, the VP of marketing or something, that VP of marketing is probably going to have to get something rubber stamped and by the CFO, and something in a good economy they just would have been allowed to do without asking for it. Now they're going to have to really prove out, hey, this is valuable, this is the payback period, this is why we want to spend this money now. even though we're not as, even though we have all this uncertainty and maybe don't have access to the funds that we wish we had access to.
Okay, that makes sense. I really like how you're talking about, having the spreadsheets around so that you could find the ROI kind of calculator with your prospects. I think that's a really important thing that you, if you can and you're able to do. Sometimes it gets really complicated and you really need to dive down with more information. But that's something that's terrific, a terrific tool that you could use for sales. As we're talking about like changing our messaging to reduce costs for the prospects, what about reducing costs internally?
Sure. I mean, you mean like how ways CEOs or business leaders can cut back on costs? I mean, I think you kind of, the first thing you want to do is look at your team and see if figure out exactly, look at your P&L first and see exactly what your burn rate is and really get a deep understanding on that and kind of project what if sales are down, what happens if we have these, what are expenses really going to look like, and kind of build a forward-looking P&L basically where you're able to predict, okay, well, here's the cash flows that are going to be coming in and out during the next year, and that's going to have that flow down to the bank account at the bottom, and see exactly how long you have until you run out of money. And don't just use percentages that say, oh, I'm going to grow 4% a month every month. Really dive in deep into where exactly is growth going to come from, or what if how sensitive am I to having less growth? Where could I cut costs? Go through each line item and dive. With a fine tooth comb, you have to be able to predict how long do I have in terms of runway. Because if you don't have long enough, and we especially as startup companies may not have access to debt the way bigger companies do, it may be a tough time to get equity investments, and so we really have to kind of envision the path to break even. And if we're not at break even and doesn't seem to be a path to getting there, we have to evaluate carefully what expenses we can remove from the P&L to make sure that we're able to keep things floating for long enough. Because you need figure out what are the essential expenses and make sure you can keep those going for as long as possible, and cut the things that are not essential.
Can you give us some examples of non-essential?
Well, like your office space, maybe that would be non-essential, but it could be,
for the sales team specifically, like how can we cut costs on the sales team?
Well, I mean, the sales team, there's probably not a lot of travel expenses going on already at this point. It's the big thing, and this is really across the board. The major expenses that startups tend to have is headcount. So, you want to look very carefully at your headcount and see, are there any weak links in the team? Are there people that were lower performers who we're probably gonna cut eventually anyway? It's better to let them go earlier rather than later. On the sales team, maybe it's newer reps that haven't scaled up all the way, or maybe aren't scaling the way you'd like them to. Remember that another thing to think about is it's a different world right now than it was 8 months ago, right? It's been very challenging to hire talented sales reps, for example, but really talented people in a lot of roles. It's been extremely difficult over the last 5 years, depending on where you are in the world. And it's definitely been kind of a candidate's market, but it's now more of a buyer's market, I would say, meaning, with the economy where it's at, and with very high unemployment, there's lots of great people out there. If you're a sales leader, for example, lots of great sales reps who are furloughed, who are unemployed, and who would love the opportunity to work for your company. So it's a great time to level up your team. It's a great time if you do have resources to add to your team and bring in some really fantastic people. But that's, if you have to cut costs and your runway is not long enough, then unnecessary headcount is probably one of the first places you should look after getting rid of the obvious, the obvious expenses that you don't need.
So for the leadership side, then, cut it. Obviously, you always want to kind of cut weak links after you've given them the opportunity and you really worked with them. But now more than ever, for the sales leaders, whether it's the owner or a VP sales or sales manager, how it's going to be really challenging right now for them, because there's more pressure on everybody to do things quicker, to get a new sales rep up to speed quicker, to get a failing sales rep back up to speed quicker. Have you experienced this?
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure right now. People are demanding results, and they're demanding them quicker. There's just less fat on the bone right now, right? I think a lot of people's revenues dropped. I think a lot of people are experiencing pressure on their margins, pressure on what they're able to charge from their customers. I think prospects are buying more slowly, if at all. And I think that pressure flows right through the whole team. And so you very well, as a VP of sales or a sales leader, maybe asked to trim the fat, and then they come back. They may be asked that in April, and then they came back in June and were like, yeah, we need to do that again. We need more because this is revenue's dropped, and we need to extend the runway, right?
Yeah,
I think in those cases, there's kind of a couple ways to look at it, right? Like, if you have to fire people that you don't want to fire, and let's assume you already trimmed the fat, and now you're down to people that you really wanted to keep on the team, muscle. I mean, first of all, it's important to explain make sure the CFO has on their top of their mind that that revenue comes from sales activity, right? And if you get rid of salespeople, revenue will fall. And you actually, if a rep is bringing in $200,000 in revenue more than you'd be able to bring in if that rep wasn't there, and that rep costs $100,000 a year, you really want to keep that rep, right? But let's just say that the CFO understands that, and now it's time, and they've said, yeah, you gotta lower your team another X percent, 20%, whatever. I think the classic business school wisdom is, if you're going to do layoffs, you want to do it all at once, because doing several rounds of layoffs is really it's very stressful to a company, right? Because people start thinking, well, I'm next. It keeps people from focusing. It keeps people from that people spend time looking for other employment options, et cetera. So that's the classic wisdom, is to say, okay, to do it all at once and be like, okay, we're done now. Here's the financials. We're in the black. We're fine. We're good to go. No, there's not going to be another cut. I think, it's a little trickier with that. I guess I would say that traditional wisdom should be perhaps questioned in times of COVID, because things could just pop right back to normal 6 months from now, effectively. So, you may want to be a little finer and not go as big the first time. Like, it might, a series of smaller cuts maybe it would make more sense, because you actually don't know we don't know where we're going to be in November. We could be looking a lot better depending on your industry, right? So if you overcut, then you'd really regret it if you were cutting great people that you wanted to keep, right? So I think, because times are so uncertain, you might want to take a finer knife as opposed to a cleaver, even though the cleaver is classically recommended. But I think the other option that I think is maybe even more attractive in times like this, because jobs are really hard to come by, and I think that the other option is just to reduce salary. So if you had to reduce, and I would not say this in a good, if you had a startup that was in trouble in a good economy, I would not say do this. If your choices were, I'm going to reduce everyone's salary by 20%, or I'm going to fire 20% of the team, and financially that's going to get me to the same place. I would, in a good time, I would definitely say don't lower everyone's salary by 20% because you're going to lose all your good people to other companies. But in a situation where it's a really bad economy and belts everywhere are tight and there's not a lot of jobs, you can kind of think about that second option where you lower everyone's salary by 20%.
Okay.
That's I think when you do this especially with sales reps, I would focus on their base, not their bonus, because if you lower the bonus, that kind of takes away their incentive to sell. But if it's like someone on the marketing team or something, their bonus is obviously a much smaller percentage of their total comp, so you can just kind of do it across the board over there. But I think it's a lot. If you wanted to do a 20% cutting across the board of salaries, then I would do it. I would do just 20% for a marketing person or an engineer. But for a salesperson, I would do a bigger cut, but just to their base and so maybe you do a 40% cut to their base, but their bonus stays intact. And so their overall salary ends up going down by 20%, but it was focused on the base salary. And the nice thing about this is the whole team keeps their health insurance. Like I mentioned, in America, we lose that if we're not employed. Everyone keeps their job. Everyone's able to make rent. Everyone, keeps their health insurance, etc. One way to make this feel fairer as well is you could give people Wednesdays off or Fridays off, or kind of stagger the days off across the week so you keep coverage depending on how you'd want to do it. But you could give, there may be less work to do right now too, and so you may be able to say, hey, we're lowering everybody's salaries by 20%, but we're also going to have you work 20% less. So it's kind of fair and be transparent. I think transparency and honesty is really important, right? In these times, and it's important to be clear with people, why you're doing what you're doing, and to show them, hey, here's the runway, right? If we don't do this, we're going to run out of money, and then we're all in trouble.
I couldn't agree. I think it's really important. But it sounds like everything's very negative. I'm seeing a lot of most companies that I'm working with are actually doing quite well in this time. Initially it was a little bit of a shock the first couple months, but then things are starting to pick up and teams are starting to sell again and being more active.
Mm-hmm. I think that's accurate. Yeah. They're more active. The GDP of America is down 11%. So things are still bad, but they are getting better. I think they're not dropping anymore. I think so things are kind of creeping back now, and the stock market's obviously still high. That hasn't been affected as much.
Yeah.
But across, I think if you work with startups a lot, I think a lot of, in general, technology hasn't been hit the same way as a beer company selling beer to bars has been hit in this economy, right? So I think that this has been the hit that the economy has taken has been focused in certain areas, and certainly it's affected those of us in tech less than a lot of people.
Absolutely. All right, cool, Steve. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. How can people reach out to you or learn more about Badger Maps?
Well, the best place to learn about Badger Maps and what we do for field salespeople is our website, badgermapping.com. Best way to hear from me, I guess the best place is to reach out to me is probably LinkedIn. Just look up Steve Benson, Badger Maps. There's a lot of Steve Bensons out there, unfortunately. I'm not the first one that comes up because that's like a mass murderer, but I'm a different guy. But
that's my other personality.
yeah, only on Tuesdays. But yeah, the website, LinkedIn. My podcast is a great way to hear about the things I talk about. I have a podcast called Outside Sales Talk, specifically for outside salespeople, and I bring sales thought leaders on there to kind of give people their 2 cents through the perspective of we're making this for outside salespeople. So that's a fun thing to listen to as well.
Excellent, Steve. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Startup Sales with Adam Springer. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Contact Adam about speaking engagements or consulting services at adam@startupsales.io.